without further ado, please, Bob Gurr.
Thank you for that nice intro. I get different kind of intros. Sometimes they go for many, many minutes. And one time last year up in Concord, there were 3 people who said, well, we each want 5 minutes. And I let them go 60 seconds, and I said, that's it. and then we had about maybe 400 people in the room. And I was trying to think, what people might like. And classically, when you go to a meeting, they always say, a man will give a speech, and then at the last second, he'll have a Q&A. And I told this group, I said, I'm not sure what you're interested in, but if I did a Q&A right now, I would know, and then I would know how to put on my show when we're done with the Q&A. So would that appeal to you?
Sure.
Oh, you want the speech first? All right, we'll modify it a little bit. Huh? Can you hear me all okay? No. Oh, there. Yeah, everyone's a little bit different. Oh, I got a dog leash. It's not long enough. Oh, here we go. Put it right out there. Where are you standing? Oh, okay. The leash is short. Okay. Can you hear me now okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Better.
Better. Okay, all right. Everyone's a little different, so apologize for that. Oh, there's the speakers. Oh, okay. That's the way it works. Every venue and every group of guests are all a little bit different. How many of you have no idea who I am? Okay, that'll work. How many people have heard my name but you're still not sure? Oh, no. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's good. I really want to know how many folks have a vague recollection that I had something to do with Disneyland or something like that. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, that way we can kind of figure out what to do here. Because on one hand, it's kind of embarrassing if I'm not on the internet, but if I go on the internet and take a look, it'll wind up that I've done all this stuff for all these years for not only Disney, but a whole bunch of other companies also. So when people ask me a question, they want to know very detailed questions because they kind of know all the main questions. But when I meet somebody for the first time, I kind of like that because, there's a lady put her hand up over here, and it's like, well, I can explain who I am eventually here. So it's kind of neat to have just sort of an acquaintance with people rather than have folks that been being on the internet all the time, looking at you and quite aware of what you've done. Backing up just a little bit, I started out in high school. I was going to be an aircraft engineer, and my math, I never got above an F in geometry. So I was no good at math, so I decided, okay, I'll design cars, just the body of the cars, since that's just artwork, don't need any math. So I went to the Art Center College of Design up in LA, and part of the way through the classes, I was given a General Motors scholarship and was hired by General Motors just before graduation. I was sent to Detroit, and the way colleges worked in those days, you had what's called a job placement officer to make sure you go into the place that hired you. Well, that's not the way it works in Detroit back in 1952. This guy was a professional drunk and lobbyist of Ford Motor Company. So the address they gave me to appear was the Ford Motor Company, not the General Motors Company. So I wound up burning my bridge before I ever got to it. So then in Ford, I was given a great job, advanced styling. You couldn't get a better job when you're 20 years old, advanced styling. And in just 2 weeks, I saw that it was a dead-end job in Detroit. I'm born in California, and I put my heart into car design, and in 2 weeks I could see, this is not going to be it. So, a year and a day later, I left and came back to California just suddenly. A bad tasting lunch, and I just quit and came home. Had no fear to abandon a perfectly good education and come back here. And of course, I stopped at a place where I'd done some books you know, a year or two earlier, the guy says, "Gee, I didn't know you were coming. I got so much work for you. Here's your old drafting board. Get started on the stuff I need you to do." So that was kind of interesting. So I bought a rubber stamp and named myself R.H. Gurr Industrial Design and a JCPenney invoice pad. And I said, "Okay, I'm in business." And after a little over a year, I got a call to go to the Walt Disney Studios. So that's how the Disney career started. I mean, nothing is planned. Everything's just very happenstance. And I didn't know really much about a Walt Disney, although I'd seen the building that he worked in, because our family lived in North Hollywood, and my dad's business was in Glendale, so we had to drive through Burbank. And he always said that's where Mickey Mouse lives, and that's where Donald Duck lives. Well, I didn't like Mickey Mouse. I liked the duck. The duck was more irascible. I don't know how to explain it, Walt, but I like the duck better. Sorry, Mickey. So anyway, walking into this studio, it was called Walt Disney Productions in those days. It was a big movie studio, a big animation studio. And there were all these people working on this new amusement park. So it was a new business for them, certainly a new company for me. And Walt immediately threw me into designing a body for what's called the little Autopia car, because amusement parks have to have what they call little bump cars all the time. So his idea of the bump car was going to be a more modern car, representative like sports cars in Southern California, rather than an ugly type amusement car, which some guy was trying to sell them a bunch of them, and they were not very good looking. Can you still hear me back there? Okay in the back. Okay, all right, good. I can hardly tell, you know, whether it's working here or not. Ernie,
Yes.
the speakers work. These the ones you got here?
Yes.
Oh, are they back? Because I think they talk into the carpet. Is that okay? Keep going? Yeah, keep on. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just like it was under the table there. Okay. Let's see. Technical question here. How's it doing? Testing one. Is it a little better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I could kind of speak a little bit more here. It's always the technical stuff that's very, very fascinating. So anyway, we're in with a group of people who Walt had reassigned a lot of people in the studio from, say, animation, background, art, all that kind of stuff. And he picked up some people from outside the company. And I was one of the 7 people he picked from outside the company. And he had 11 people from inside the company. So there was 18 of us by the end of 1954, the year before Disneyland opened. And you can appreciate I was 23 at the time. I'm almost 88 now. So I managed to outlive everybody else. So I'm the last man standing.
Hallelujah.
Of the original group, yeah. I didn't intend to do this, but Exitencio was our last departed. You know, of course, he helped design a lot of stuff in the Haunted Mansion. So I thought, well, the Haunted Mansion called him, you know, before the 50th. You know, so thanks, X. I appreciate the new assignment here. It's very funny, you know, that when you did something, you did it for a long time, and it's really serious. And then when you turn around, it was kind of funny, you know, that you never intend to wind up where you wind up. You know, it's kind of odd. Like I never intended to wind up working for Mickey Mouse when I wanted to do airplanes and had a short circuit through cars. You know, and then after Disney fired me after 27 years, it wound up I was doing 150 jobs for everybody else. And in the list of everybody else, I worked for arch enemy, Universal Studios. They wanted a 30-foot animated King Kong. Oh, I'll do that. Sounds funny. 30-foot tall animal. Yes, I'll do that. Sure. You know, and then there's I ran across a kid, 26 years old, said he was Michael Jackson. He wanted me to design lighting for his new show. I'm not in the rock and roll business, but I was willing to learn. So I did about a $250,000 job for him. And then later on, there was a guy named Steve Wynn in Las Vegas. He wanted to sink a ship on Las Vegas Boulevard. Nobody wanted to do it. It's just too dangerous. I said, sounds good to me. I'll take it. So you wind up like from the Utopia car, I design bodies. I'm trained. I'm not an engineer. I've never been to engineering school in my life, and Walt assumed that if I did the bodies, I did the mechanical part of the car. Well, I didn't. I just said yes and shut up and kept figuring, what am I going to do now? I found out everybody else was in the same boat. They're doing stuff that they had never been trained for, but Walt figured they would be able to do something that he wanted. And would size them up and then ask them to go do this. And that was kind of a universal thing Walt had with all those original early Imagineers. So those first years getting ready for Disneyland, opening Disneyland, was absolutely fascinating. Working with people that were curious, they were flexible, they were unafraid to do anything. They all obviously loved Walt. They loved Walt's ideas. And they just absolutely paid attention to everything Walt suggested, the way we do stuff, how he should tell stories, how should we do attractions, all of that. That was about a 12-year period while he was still here, while I was still there at the company. So those first years were absolutely fascinating, and the thing about that kind of work is you don't realize the magnitude of what you're doing at the moment. It's not until 20, 30, 40 years later somebody asks you a question about it, and then it's like, oh, I didn't think it was that important. I was just trying to get it done, you know. And then I said, well, Bob, didn't you realize you're creating classics? Well, no. you go to work every day. You're excited. You hate it when it's 5:30 because, oh my God, we got to shut down, go home. I got to come back in the morning. It totally reversed of way how you would like to work on anything. So that's basically kind of the setting of what those early years with Walt were like. Then, of course, as time went on, by 1961, Disneyland, which was an independent company, Disneyland Inc., was absorbed by the Walt Disney Productions Company. And then it became, a really big professional company, and it still continued to grow. And as you are following the news in recent months, not only did Disney Company buy Pixar, they bought Marvel, and they bought the George Lucas Star Wars operation, and they recently bought part of Fox. So they got a lot of business elements there. Also, if you go to the internet, you'll find there's a great big graphic that looks like a mouse ears, and it's got a lot of fine print. It's a chart of all the Disney companies, all in one chart. It's a great big chart. Go look for it and download it. It's a great big chart. It's the arrangement of all the Disney companies. There's around 350 Disney companies. Most people have no idea that because, you live in Anaheim. I only know Disneyland and maybe a movie or two, but you never give it a thought. Is that 350 companies? Yes, it is. It's that massive company. A lot of responsibility, a lot of things they've got to do. So now the company is so big, it has so many people doing so many things. We have to compare that with what was it like when it was just Walt and some Imagineers trying to get a crazy idea of an amusement park to work. So that brings me to opening day down here in Anaheim. You got to remember, I lived up in Studio City, which is way the other side of downtown Los Angeles, and I drove down here every day during that summer of '55 all the way past Labor Day because everything we opened didn't work. On Monday morning, we had more stuff broken, and I figured should have broken. So when something is broken, you don't cry about it. You say, well, I'm going to figure out why it didn't work, and I'm going to figure out what it's going to take to make it work. And that was universal for everybody on everything in the park. Of course, if you're designing a mechanical thing or an electrical thing and it breaks, now you got a big problem. But if you're an architect or an art director, the paint on the wall never gives you any trouble. It just looks good. You don't have to worry about it. So I was jealous of architects and show designers because if it's static and it sits there and it looks good, don't worry about it. There's nothing to fix, But the people that did rides, anything that was in motion, anything to do with operations of a park, they were literally at ground zero trying to learn what do we have to do to make a good park and make it work really well. So the operations people at Disneyland were absolutely the key people, because they're the first people that we had trained quite a few of them. We had a guy by the name of Dick Nunes came in and was trained the first people and created the University of Disneyland, where we trained our cast members. But the minute you open the door and the guests come in, they tell you how they're going to behave inside your park. Like simple things. An architect will lay out a walkway and where to put some bunch of flower beds and stuff, but the guests will tell you what's the shortest way from one place to the other, and they'll leave the sidewalk and trample your garden. Well, within a few months, the concrete people come out and they put the walkways where the guests said they should have been. It's that kind of stuff. So there's a big learning curve. That was fascinating in that first summer, and of course for the first couple of years. So you can appreciate, for a lot of us, this was a gargantuan recovery experiment to get stuff to work. Some of you might remember that Disneyland used to be closed on Mondays and Tuesdays in the early days. This was the day we brought in all the welders, we brought in everybody to fix everything that broke, because we couldn't fix it while we're doing the park 7 days a week. So we got into the habit of having, there's a couple of seats here, guys. Can you let them squeeze in there? You know, they're big guys. They're not too scary. They'll get sit there. Yeah, man, he's okay. That's all right. So, yeah, we got room for about, 2 more people, Ernie? Yeah, otherwise you got to go to Abbey Rents and get more chairs. You know? So you can appreciate that if you talk to somebody that was there in those early days, they have a different story than when you read a book about the history of Disneyland. And how many books have there been written about the history of Disneyland? Oh, it looks so nice, and it's all so Pollyanna, it's so pretty and everything. Well, maybe not. It took a lot of work to get it up to by roughly around 1960-61 to where it was pretty smooth operating, and Walt could take a deep breath and say that, well, we're going to do some big expansions like we did in 1959. We opened like 3 big attractions and 2 little attractions all in one day in the June of 1959. And then, of course, Walt sees other things that he'd like to do. So he started sending us some of our people over to the Brussels World's Fair in 1958, because he was getting ready to do the New York World's Fair that we didn't know about. And in the meantime, as soon as we learned about that, he's sending us up to Seattle to the Seattle World's Fair. We didn't realize until later, in the back of his mind, he had an idea for another theme park, but one that was going to be look at the serious future of living in a really nice community, which would turn out to be his idea for Epcot. So this is another interesting thing about people that were working with him. You never knew what he was thinking when you're looking at him, and you'd be working on one thing, but he's thinking of some other thing, and he was always had thoughts going years ahead, and whatever he's doing now is sort of working its way slowly toward these great big dreams. Of course, the big one turned out to be Epcot, which turned out to be Walt Disney World, which turned out to be an absolutely massively big, giant park that so much of the eastern part of America, that's their park, and we have our Disneyland out here. And of course, that led to doing 4 projects for the New York World's Fair. So all of a sudden, we find ourselves, we're not just designing Disneyland, we're designing attractions for corporate sponsors in a great big city called New York City, which is entirely new. That was not what some of us signed up for, to do something like that. And then, of course, coming out of that, it didn't take very long for our secret project called the Project W to suddenly show up in late 1965, which then turned out to be the Epcot project. And along with that, as we're developing Walt Disney World, we'd been open maybe 1 or 2 years, and a couple of Japanese guys come over and knock on our doors, and we didn't take them very seriously. There were 2 older gentlemen. One of them was the chairman of the board of Keisei Railway, and the other guy was the chairman of Oriental Land Company, and they'd built a big landfill in Tokyo Bay. And they said, we want you to build our Disneyland for us. And we just thought, oh, these guys, it's a bunch of old guys, you know what? They want to do a Disneyland. Well, it turned out they were dead serious. They said, we have lots of land. We have a lot of money. And we want you to design and build it. How much money can we give you? The two guys were very nice, so it turns out we started working with them. They wanted a Disneyland-like park all their lives, but not knowing it was going to be a Disneyland. They went to kindergarten together.
Oh.
Look at that. Two little kids become mega billionaire type corporate leaders, and they want their own Disneyland, and they can afford it. Okay, now we get in the business of understanding how to do a Disneyland in another country. How many of you have been to Tokyo Disneyland? Okay, how about Tokyo Disney Seas? Anybody gone over there? That's the best park in the world. It's Tokyo Disney Seas. Because where we would have a budget to kind of constrain us, every time we were doing something for them, they said, make more, we have more money. It's the opposite of when you do it for yourself, you know, but these guys, that's the way they want it. That's why their park is so gorgeous and so thorough and so beautiful, because this, so you can see this whole idea that Walt had, starting back in the 1930s over at the Griffith Park merry-go-round, went way beyond the original ideas he had. He actually attracted two guys in another country that they wanted a park. So it became very obvious to the company now that, of course, Walt's gone now. Say, we should do one in Europe. So we had countries wanted us to do in Europe. Some of us wanted to do it down in Valencia, down in Spain, where it's warm all the time. But we got a better cheap deal for some swampland near Paris, which is cold in the winter. But that's the way it worked out. You know, the Parisians don't necessarily like Disney-like stuff, but after the park opened for a few years, boy, there was a lot of people in Paris, a lot of people in Europe. Boy, they go to that park all the time, which showed a good idea. Well, it could fit anywhere. And then, of course, it didn't take long. The Hong Kong people said, "Oh, us too. Can we have a park?" Yes, a little park. So we worked with that. And then, of course, here comes Shanghai. And Shanghai is actually a partially private company and mostly kind of communist government company, very much run by the government, but they have a lot of land, they have a lot of money, and they have a lot of patience, and they have a lot of people who work 24 hours a day to build it. So Shanghai opened up, and apparently it's a very, very successful, beautiful